let's get into it. Let me just grab a quick sip. So inquiry question is, how does mutation introduce new alleles into the population? So module 6 is a really nice segue from module 5, where now when we look at mutations, firstly we're going back to our processes of replication, translation, transcription, and talking about mutations affecting those processes. Okay, here we are. So first question we have here is that we're going to look at is, how do mutagens operate, the different types of mutations. We're going to talk about somatic versus germline mutation, and then talk about the effects of mutations on coding versus non-coding DNA, and then look at causes of genetic variation, and finish off by talking about population genetics. So we're going to talk about mutations, gene flow, and genetic drift. So here we are. Inquiry question is, how does mutation introduce new alleles into a population? Remember, a mutation, firstly, is a permanent alteration to the nucleotide sequence of an organism's genome. This is where we are permanently altering someone's or rather natural circumstances or their own system leads to the alteration of someone's own nucleotide sequences, which then changes the proteins that they are able to make. And now let us talk about somatic versus germline mutations. You kind of would already be familiar with this specific concept from module 5. So germline mutations, germline, it's going to affect the germ cells, the gametes, right? So for example, these are the parental gametes. They're going to fertilize. There's a condition, let's say here, that there's a trait specifically that's carried in the mother's in the chromosomes here, in the egg, and so when fertilization occurs, there's an embryo, the entire organism is going to carry that mutation. And because the entire organism carries that mutation, when that organism reproduces, half of their gametes will carry that mutation, which means that depending on whether it's dominant or a recessive allele, the offsprings may have that mutation because it's affecting the germ cells, it's affecting their sex cells. On the other hand, somatic mutations is a somatic mutation. Somatic mutation is a somatic mutation. No, somatic mutations will only affect body cells. So what that means is, here if we have a mutation in some cells over here, it's only going to affect this area. It's not going to affect the offspring of the individual because the mutation is in their somatic cells, it's in their body cells. The mutation isn't in their germ cells, it's not in their gametes, so then it won't pass on to their offspring. So there we are. All I just said. So germline mutations affects the gametes, and so changes to the gametes leads to changes changes to all cells of the offspring, and the offspring will inherit mutated information, and it can be caused by both external and internal factors. An example of that is cystic fibrosis. Somatic cell mutations are when mutations affect your somatic cells, your already existing cells, your body cells, and so that means that it's not going to affect the future generation. So example of that is skin cancer, where for example, if an individual has skin cancer, it won't be passed on to their offspring, because it only affects that individual's somatic cells. But there could be like genetic factors and stuff that means that the individual may be more susceptible to it, but that's different. Like they wouldn't have it just because the parent had it. Whereas in germline mutation, the chances of the offspring having the condition are pretty high because depending on whether it's dominant or recessive, because it's passed on through the generation.